You are listening to your New Puppies Podcast, starting you and your dog off on the right paw. Here's your host, Debbie Salento.
Hello and welcome to episode 45 of Your New Puppies Podcast. I'm Debbie, and today we're going to talk about some pros and cons of different types of training programs. So I'm going to talk about a puppy class versus an obedience class versus private training versus online training. So this will help you make a decision on what type of training program is going to work best for you and your dog. Now, remember, no matter what training program or type of training that you choose, it all comes down to you. You could find the best type of training out there, hire the best trainer in the world, spend gobs of money, but you still have to be the one to do the work. Because once you walk out of the class, once the trainer walks out of your door, it's just you and your dog. So when making this decision, it should be based on how you are going to learn best and how you are going to absorb the information and then be able to apply it with your dog and what exactly is going on, like what you're looking to learn. Is it common, universal, typical dog behavior and commands, or is there a specific problem that may or may not be uncommon? So those two things combined should help you make the decision. So let's start by talking about a puppy class. So a puppy class is for dogs that are anywhere from 3 months to 6 months old. You know, individual classes might have different requirements, but that's what it is in general. And the emphasis should be on socialization with a little bit of learning. This is the one type of training I highly recommend any new puppy owner do. For that reason, you get to go to a clean, safe, healthy environment under the supervision of a trainer that knows appropriate puppy play, and your dog gets to meet many different types of dogs. So especially if you have concerns about vaccines, it's a great way to get your puppy started during those prime socialization weeks, knowing that all the other puppies in there have been verified that they are healthy and on their vaccine schedule. Those are the pros. You get to socialize your dog in an environment that isn't available anywhere else, and you get to start to learn about puppy behaviors. They usually start with some basic obedience, and they'll go over some common puppy behaviors. And compared to, say, a private lesson, it's relatively inexpensive. If you think about if it's 45 minutes to an hour for 4 to 6 weeks, what you're paying per hour typically is inexpensive. Now, what it costs varies greatly from where you live and who the trainer is. The biggest con, and really the only one that I see, is that just like with any group learning environment, the personal attention may not be there, especially depending on how big the class is. So you might not get all your questions answered, and the trainer teaching the course isn't going to have time to go through every single detail that you may or may not need. But it is a fantastic way to get your feet wet. Now, an obedience class is similar to a puppy class in that it's a group learning environment, but what you may or may not get out of it is very different. So an obedience class should be for dogs that are 6 months and older. I think a dog any younger than 6 months simply doesn't have the attention span for an obedience class, because where puppy class is emphasis on socialization and play with a little bit of learning, obedience classes are different, because the emphasis is on learning, and maybe there'll be a little bit of play. Maybe none at all, depending on how the trainer runs the class. They need to be old enough to be able to have focus for 45 minutes to an hour. Now, if you have the time and the means to do an obedience class, I always recommend it, because besides learning very useful skills with your dog, it's an amazing bonding experience, because, there's that gap of communication between us and our dogs, because we are two different species that talk two different languages. So obedience is a great way to create a bridge. And you get to start to learn how your dog learns. Your dog starts to learn your body language and what you want from them. So it's always a great exercise. And an obedience class, a group class, just like the puppy class, is relatively inexpensive compared to a private trainer. So you do have access to a live trainer who can help you troubleshoot if you're having a little bit of trouble, because remember, these classes are for you to learn how to then go home and train your dog. So this is great if you want to learn like universal dog stuff, because a lot of them will go over like common dog problems like jumping and barking and leash walking, as well as all the different commands. Now, a couple drawbacks with group classes is that sometimes they are just too distracting to the other dogs. So now that we are trying to focus and learn, a room full of dogs might be too much for your dog. Whenever you're teaching your dog something new, you want to start in a distraction-free environment. So you want to start at level 0, but a class is like level 8 to 10. Which, as I mentioned before, is okay because the class is for you to learn and then you can take them home and start them in their 0 environment. Just don't have high expectations inside the class at first. But for a handful of dogs, that environment is just too much. It's too stressful. It's too distracting, and you won't get anything out of the class. And then just like with the puppy class and any group learning situation, the personal attention is limited, especially depending on the size of the class. So you'll get a lot of little troubleshooting, like when you're working on commands, most of the time, the trainer will pop from person to person and give you pointers, but you might not get all of your questions answered. And if you have a very specific or uncommon problem, you're not going to solve it inside an obedience class. The obedience class could be part of the training, but whenever you have a very specific, especially an uncommon behavior that you're trying to address, sometimes your only option is private training, but an obedience class can be a supplement to that. So let's talk about private training. Well, the biggest advantage to private training is it's the ultimate of personal attention. It's just you, the trainer, your dog, and anything that you want to work on. So this is perfect if you have a specific issue. A little bonus is that they tend to be more flexible with the schedule. So with the group classes, if you can't make the times that the class is every week, then you're out of luck. With a private trainer, there's a lot more flexibility in that case. And a pro could be that there aren't other dogs there. If you have a dog that just doesn't get along with other dogs, that it's too stressful for them, a private session, there's no other dogs there. But flip side is that could also be a con. You want to teach them to behave with other dogs around, or you want them to have some sort of socialization. So that could be a pro or a con depending on your situation. And you also get to start in the distraction-free environment instead of being in this class of, 10 dogs. But something that can happen where this will turn into a con is that you sometimes get stuck there. So your dog is aces inside your kitchen, but the second you bring him outside, he's lost everything. And the only way to combat that is to do the work. Once they learn how to do it inside your house, you bring them outside. You have to back up a couple steps in the training and then teach them in this more distracting environment. And then you build up the distractions from there. And of course, the most obvious drawback or con is that it's expensive. You're paying for that private, personal, focused time with the trainer, so it can be pricey, especially if you want to do or need multiple sessions. And then last, there's online training. So anything from podcasts, YouTube videos to online courses, which are becoming more and more popular. And yes, you already know, in full disclosure, I do have an online course. But let's talk about some pros and cons to doing online training. Well, the biggest pro is that it's going to be your least expensive option. It's going to range from free to anything probably less than a group class. That's the beauty of online. You can get a lot of things for a little less money. It's also the ultimate in a flexible schedule. I mean, you could be watching videos and working with your dog at 2 a.m. if that's your schedule, especially if you have a whole big busy family involved and you're trying to get everybody on the same page. You don't need to get everybody in the same class or in the same room when the trainer's there. Everybody can watch the videos or listen or read the blog on their own time. And just like the group classes, this is good if you want to learn the basics. And if you're an independent learner, like me, even in college, I was like, just give me the textbook and I'll come back to you if you ask questions. That's just how I learned. I am a very independent learner. And if that's you, online can work. But of course, just like with anything that's online, really just like with anything that might be free or very inexpensive, sometimes it's hard to weed through all of the noise because there's a lot out there. And this cannot be used for severe behaviors. If you have an uncommon and a severe behavior, and I know I've already said this before, your only real option is a in-person trainer. Even for me, inside my course, on social media, when people are asking me questions, if it has anything to do with fearfulness, anxiety, aggression, I will straight up say, this can't be solved online. You have to find an in-person trainer. Now, if you're able to find a dog trainer or somebody you trust, like I like to think if you're still with me in this podcast, you're enjoying the information, you're getting something out of it, and you're finding that it's working when you apply it. If you're able to find that through all of the noise, then online can be a good option. Again, if you're just looking to learn the basics. And then for me, my favorite thing about online training, so my course came out of the frustration of not being able to teach my new puppy clients everything they need to know within a class, within a session. Like I really sat back and was like, all right, if I had all the attention and all the time in the world, what would I want my puppy clients to know? And that's where my video lessons came from inside the course. Because inside a class, you only have so much time. And you have so many questions and you have so many people that you never get to everything. And the same thing with a private training session. I can't tell you how many times I walked out and I answered all their questions and I did everything they wanted me to come there for. But there were so many things that they didn't even know to ask. And I just didn't have the time to get into it with them. Why I was drawn to the online training. And then inside, I try to close that gap of lack of personal attention by having an entire area where my students can ask me questions. I have video sessions available at a discounted price. And I'm not the only one out there. And it's becoming more popular, but it might be a little more rare. But you can find that. But you have to spend the time and the energy to do that. Okay, so there are the pros and cons to different types of training programs. You can do one of them, you can do all of them, because they all have different benefits. And then even if you find the training program or you're like, yes, that will work for me, you have to find the right trainer. Just because somebody says they're a dog trainer doesn't mean they're right for you. Finding a trainer can be a personal thing because you need to trust them. We're talking about your dog and their behavior and raising your new fur baby. So if you don't trust them or if you don't even like them, then that's not going to be a good relationship. For example, I get all the time, I don't want to know the background. I don't want to know why my dog's behaving that way. I just want to fix the behavior. I'm not the trainer for you because that's not my style. That's not how I work. Or I want to learn all the obedience commands and go into advanced obedience. I'm not the trainer for you. I go into basic obedience, but there's so many amazing trainers out there that do nothing but obedience and that's not where my passion lies. I kind of leave it to them and I work with dog behavior and I like to educate owners about dog behavior to help them raise their dog even when I'm not there. And if you're still here on this podcast, I'm assuming then that's something you enjoy. So my advice to you is do your research, talk to them, interview them. If you want to hire somebody, see if they have a blog or a podcast or a book, and that's really going to give you an idea of what their style is and what their personality is. And don't be afraid to think, I'm not really connecting with you. I'm going to go find a trainer that I am, because it can make such a difference. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are enjoying this podcast, please rate and review it, because it helps other dog owners find the podcast. And if you want to continue training with me and you want more information about my online course, it's a 4-week course for new puppy owners. And you can find more information on that at playtimepaws.com/puppy. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be talking with you soon. Bye for now.